All right, Sean, we're back. It's me and you again.
Once again.
Another video, Sans Baxter. We've kicked him out.
Wow.
It's just us.
It's strange. But in a good way. It's like being in a pool. Somebody's just
Doesn't feel that strange to me because your hair is kind of tall and weird too. So when I look over out of the corner of my eye, it's exactly the same. Yeah, but you have less movie, wisdom. That's all.
I can mix some in. I don't have much movie facts.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They don't have to be true or anything. It's fine.
Wait, I can just make it up?
Yeah. That's not what we're talking about, though. We're talking about, well, okay, so let's start here. So Sean does a lot of production. He records people. I would say for a living, but, maybe not quite yet. But he does a lot of it. You do a lot of production.
I do.
You know how to run Logic and Pro Tools and all the things that sort of blow my mind because I'm very bad at it. I like to be on the other side. I like to be, playing and someone else doing the magical things. But you recently, Sean has a band called the Violet Exploit. Did I say it right? God, I don't know why I always panic. I'm saying it wrong.
It's okay. People call it the Violet Explosion, the Violent Explosion, and then a bunch of really gross things too.
I think that'd be cool if you were the Violent Explosions.
Yeah.
I feel like you missed a golden opportunity there.
We did. We're going to capitalize on it again now.
Amazing. That should be your album name. So that the Violet Exploit releases Violent Explosions. Anyways. But, so you've recently had your first experience where, you're not behind the glass doing the faders and pushing things on your computer.
That's right.
You were the guy recording.
Absolutely. I've obviously, I recorded myself a little bit, but it's never really the same, and it's not quite like...
I find that to be totally different.
It is, because, I'm hypercritical of what I'm doing, right? Like, I'm like, oh, no, and then it's actually led me to the point where most of the time whenever I try to record my own things, I tend to overthink it, and I just stop, So this was the first experience where it's like, no, we're in the studio, and I am, on that complete opposite side, and a very good friend of mine now, I'd say very good, he might be like, oh, that guy sucks at
We're
guitar.
acquaintances.
Yes.
We know each other.
His name is Jose Gonzalez. He was recording us, and he did a wonderful job, but it was quite different.
I feel like that should be like a famous producer name.
Yeah.
The great Jose Gonzalez produced this record.
He is going to be famous, yeah.
I mean, maybe so.
He goes by Jay Gons Audio.
Jay Gons.
So if you want to find him and search him up, he's a great guy. Love him to death. Love you, Jose, if you're watching.
So what did you feel like was the biggest difference? What did you notice when you record? Because just as somebody being new to tracking, in an actual sort of studio environment.
So
what did you notice?
The first day that we went in to track, we did drums. The next day was guitar deck. And whenever I went in to do guitars, the first thing that I noticed was I had really overthought a lot of the process of myself. Yes. Well, that was the thing. I was so stressed about that first day. I was like, oh, I'm going to go in here. It's going to be terrible. And we go in, and I nailed it. It was like one take. Everything was one take throughout the track for the most part. And it just felt great. I felt like, oh, I could live in the studio. Now let's get to that next day of guitar tracking, because it was not the same. I went in to do the next song, and for whatever reason, I had woken up and I felt kind of off that day in general, just as I guess the traditional vibe to things. But it was just take after take after take. I just could not get this part down. But what I did find is that I strengthened myself with it.
I got a question. Was it you who were deciding that you weren't getting the part down, or was it the people around you? Was it the band members and Jose? It
was mainly Jose, and then also myself. I knew whenever it was not a good take, and I knew whenever I was off a bit. And
so it wasn't just you being hypercritical of yourself. Because I think that can happen, right? Especially if you're not used to tracking in a studio. And this is whether you're recording at home or whether you're in a studio or your friend's basement or whatever. It is really easy to be hypercritical of everything you do.
Absolutely, and for that day I was definitely more critical of myself.
Sure.
But there were more mess ups, and I think it led me to get that way. But like you're saying, on that recording and whenever we recorded your stuff, something that I took into that first day of tracking guitars was being calm, cool, and knowing what parts I'm hearing in my head and where I want them to land. Didn't have it as much so with that other song.
So maybe you weren't quite feel as prepared beforehand. Yes. So that's a big thing. If you're going into a studio or you're recording with your band on your interface and DAW and stuff at home, the more you can have it down in your brain, like what you want to have, and it could be parts worked out. It could just be, you know, the overall vibe. But the more you're prepared, probably the smoother it's going to go.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, we've had, through me recording Jonathan here, we've had nights that were just like boom, 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 boom. And then, you know, whenever we've involved other people at times, we can kind of tell that things are off a bit. Then once we've, you know, taken out, you know, we had a guy who was singing with us at one point, and it was a little off, and then we were like, yeah, you know, and we told him like, oh yeah, have a great night, and then we got to work again, and it was just like boom, 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 firing on all cylinders. So yeah, you know, but that
the more you can streamline it, the better. It's also a really different thing to like record all together, like the band playing.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, okay, you know, scratch track, guitar with the drums, and then you put, you know, the bass or whatever order you want to layer things
build
in.
It, yeah.
And that feels different than playing live. And I feel like a lot of great live players don't thrive in the studio, and probably vice versa. I don't have as much experience with that. All the guys I know who are great studio players are monster live players too. But I'm sure you could get to the point where you're never playing live, and
absolutely.
You know.
Well, it's funny enough. We were doing the podcast earlier this week, talking with our good friend Roland or John, and we talked a lot about
John
the
Martin.
Allman Brothers, right?
Yeah.
Well, the Allman Brothers obviously are like a good Southern rock jam band. I would wonder if you took those guys out of that element, and it was like, okay, we're snapping everything to a click, and it's going to be like this. You know, would they feel? Would it be tighter? I'm sure they're amazing musicians, you know, so they might absolutely do perfectly fine. But I would wonder how that would be.
It's funny because, you know, like Dwayne spent all that time in Muscle Shoals, like being a studio guy, essentially. Yeah. My guess is they would all do fine.
Yes, well, but the quality.
They would be fine. But, I mean, like, I've had that experience, right, where I thought I was great. Well, I mean, I think I was an okay live. He thought it was great, but he really sucked. You know, but I've been in situations where like I was all like, oh yeah, I'm gonna crush this, and I get there and I wasn't used to like the click, you know, and there was no like, oh, let me make you a little drum beat. I got over that after a while of sucking at it, because luckily usually you get multiple chances to do these things.
I was gonna say, what
better.
Was your first experience like, or your first few experiences, if you can recall them? You know,
like I remember when I was. God, I had not been playing long at all. And that was when before I left North Carolina the first time, I went and recorded with this guy in his studio. And it was not good. I mean, like the songs, I was trying to record my songs. He helped a lot. He taught me, I learned a lot about him. Not even just from like studio stuff. He taught me some guitar things that I still, you know, stick with me to this day. Just like philosophy of playing, like, you know, not to kind of, you know, throw everything you can at it in the first 10 seconds to you know, spread things out and to stay in one position and milk all the great notes. And, you know, just good stuff. But the first thing I really remember after that was in an experience in Charleston. Our band wasn't really prepared. I thought we knew the songs. Do you know what I mean? But you don't realize that playing live, especially as a trio, is not like layering songs in the studio. And the guys I was playing with, awesome musicians, great dudes. They didn't want to do it to a track, and so we ended up doing it this really, or not a track, but a click track. So we did this really weird, like convoluted way where it wasn't really live, and you know, some things are the way they're done for a reason.
Yeah, that's something.
And you can experiment, but like now, if I was doing something like that now, and we started down a path and we were experimenting, and we get half an hour into it and it's just obviously not working, Jonathan would be like, no, stop, you know, because it's a waste of time and money, right? Back then I knew in my brain, hey, this is going to be a cluster, you know what? And I just, because I was young and I was the youngest dude there, I just let it go, you know what I mean? And then I think I wasted like $1,200 because I never even paid them to finish it. Like I paid that for those initial sessions, right? And then was like, this isn't even good enough to like, to have. But then they got progressively better, right? Especially, but I didn't feel really comfortable and good till I got to Nashville, was playing, you know, like writers rounds and stuff with my friends who were songwriters, and started getting to play on their demo sessions where I was using a click track or either playing, you know, like a live demo session where I really got comfortable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, see, for me, going into the studio to work with Jose, the thing that kind of taught me the most as preparation is working with you compared to like other people that I've worked with and seeing whenever somebody isn't prepared, whenever somebody is, and knowing, like you're saying, there's layers that you want to add. You know, there's a certain kind of like thickness to a track that you want to bring. And you know, that's exactly where I learned it was directly from you. So that first song, whenever we went in and tracked it, I took some time beforehand to say like, okay, I really need to think about what I want on this song before we go in there, so that we go in there and it's just on.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened. You know, we went in and it was right there and we had all those parts ready to go.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So that was huge, you know. But that all comes from those experiences that you had, you know.
Part of it too is you got to be confident, right? You got to play what you play with, because there's a tendency for me. It took a long time for me to overcome this. Like I had a certain like, you know, when I was live, I felt good. You know, I was on stage. This is my world, and whatever I was gonna play, right, wrong, or indifferent, I was gonna play with some balls, right?
Yeah.
And you get in the studio and you're like, but you got to have this confidence, right? But I do think there's some things you can do to have that going in. So maybe we'll wrap up with things I think you should think about, right? Know the songs.
Boom. That's
That's number one, right?
For me,
know the songs.
Being on
right?
the other side of that, whenever I'm talking to people, I'm like, okay, yeah. I was like, so what are you doing in the bridge at, you know, kind of like the halfway point of that? What do you mean?
And this is mostly like if your band is going to record, because it is different. Like I go into situations a lot where I'm going to go play on a track and I've never heard the songs before. That's different. You probably are used to working in studios at that point, right? That's a different thing. But if your band's going to record, everybody in the band know the song. Unless you're all studio aces, then you don't need to watch this video at all. Number two, make sure your instruments aren't like shitty. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying you got to have crazy nice stuff, but make sure you got like decent strings on your guitars. Your stuff works. Don't go in with like a shorted out switch that you've been getting by on for 3 years at gigs because you forget it. You don't think about it in between shows. Make sure that shit works. Make sure that your stuff is set up okay, that it's intonated.
Get a setup. Get a setup. Because you will save so much. Like if you go to the studio and you have a guitar that isn't set up and you go to start recording, and the first thing they hear is like a bad note or a bum note, and everything's wrong, and you go to bend to something that tunes out, the producer's just going to tell you to get out.
Get out.
I've seen it happen where like guys just like, get out. You know, and it's like, whoa.
That's maybe the last thing, right? There are a million producers out there and people who think they're producers because they got a laptop and Pro Tools or Logic, like Sean. And that's okay, right? It's fine if they're learning too. Just make sure you talk to whoever you're going to record with and that you know what you're getting into and they know what they're getting into, that you get along and you can work together. Because if you've got somebody who understands that maybe you're less experienced and can help you along, you know, or like maybe you want somebody to help you craft the arrangements for the songs, maybe you don't. Just talk about that, know it all up front, and be prepared for what you're going into. I don't think there's anybody out there who's legit who minds you asking them questions and, you know, seeing how they do the process and where they fall on that spectrum.
Yeah.
So
I mean, a big thing with that, is like having somebody who cares, you know, a producer who cares. And that, I think that's the big part within that, is somebody who's like, yeah, I really like what you're doing and I want to see this song be the best. Because if somebody doesn't care, doing what we call the turn and burn, you know, it's no good.
Well, yeah, usually less good. So anyways, so there you go. Anything else? I think we covered it.
I think that's it.
All right, hit like, subscribe, click the bell. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see Baxter back soon. Sadly, Sean's way better looking, younger, better in every way. But no, thank you guys. See you next time.